there is this thing that says that it's easier to upsell on existing customers than to actually acquire a new one.
Are you going to blow the myth? Yes.
What do you think about it?
You're going to have to bleep that out. Go ahead.
What do you think about
this? No, you start.
No, you start, or Larry starts.
No, you better lead off. You started us off.
No, I want to ask a question, like get your thoughts on the topic.
Like whether we back that.
Yeah, do you back this? Because, okay, like it's a common saying that whenever someone already bought something from you, they're going to buy again and it's easier to like upsell them.
Hypothetically, yes.
But is there actual data to back this up? Is it common knowledge, and does it work in every single case? Because let me give you like a counter example. Someone, let's say, who's alone in one team, is never going to expand to any other things, or if they have limited budget, or if they have no other needs. Do you feel like every single person on earth can be upsold to something new, or do you feel like it's more for enterprise?
Well, I would to me, and I'll blitz through them. There are six types of expansion selling. There's renewal, which is buying the same amount from the same person. There's resell, which is when you have a decision maker and you bought like 100 licenses and they churn and someone else comes in seat, and how do I resell to that person the same value? There's two types of upsell. There's selling more. Let's say I sold 100 limbless seats, but there's 200 BDRs, and so the upsell, the delta of 100. There's, let's say I sold 100 limbless seats, but I want to upsell to some different feature, but to the same person. And there's two types of cross-sell. I'm going to go, I sell to the BDR leader, but now I want to sell to the AE leader, but in the same department. And then I sold to the BDR leader originally, and I want to go true enterprise, like cross-sell to a whole nother different department. So to me, there is that saying of like, okay, well, it's easier. And I'd say yes and no. It's easier because you're already in, but it's harder because it's kind of like saying, I want to work on my marriage and make it better as opposed to moving on to someone new. So it's just a different type of hard, but I think it's an insane miss to just focus on new pipeline. And it's what 99.9% repeating of people focus on.
So you're feeling like it's a missed opportunities by most companies because they are focusing on new pipelines rather than...
Even if you just like not even thinking about renewal. They're not even thinking about renewal till like November, but yes, I think it's an absolute insane miss.
I would say in today's economic environment, I agree. It's a huge miss. And even without the dreaded R word, you've got to be close with your clients. And I've heard this over and over and over again. It's drilled in my head and I love it. The problems that you solve for your existing clients, there's no excuse why you shouldn't know what problems you're solving now and what problems you can solve in the future. What other problems are they facing? Are they potentially facing? The opportunity is there if you're close to your clients. And I think that's a problem with a lot of organizations. They're not close. They're kind of dabbling, but they're not really close in understanding what's going on.
So big question now, because it seems like something that everyone agrees on. Why do you think that 99% of companies are actually focusing on new pipeline rather than expanding the existing ones?
I think because, and this is, I had a joke before the tour that I was getting put a quarter in a quarter jar that any time a conversation led back to problem-centric selling. But in this case scenario, I think it's true because the reason people focus on new pipeline is because they're not seeing unbelievable results with their current clients, because in most case scenarios, and I've looked across most of my customers, when I teach a 6-session course on expansion selling, I'm like, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is it hinges on your pre-existing relationship of did you find out the problem that they were trying to solve, and did you work with them to solve it with your tool? So the good news is it's hinged off a pre-existing relationship. The bad news is it's hinged off of that pre-existing relationship, and 99.9% of the time they're like, well, what if I don't know the problem? What if I'm the CSM or whatever, that, and I don't know the problem that they were trying to solve? I'm like, no time like the present.
Yep.
Go. I'm like, Anjali, Brendan, like, I'm like, send an email, and it's always the most brutal exercise. And I'm like, I'm gonna make you put together a workshop, and I have them identify, 4 clients. And I'm like, if you don't for sure know the problems that they were trying to solve with your tool, you have to write an email using this template, reaching out to them, apologizing, and saying, hey, I'm so sorry, like, I don't even know what problem you were trying to solve to begin with. Would you mind sharing with, and that alone, the amount of business that it's caused for my clients just by asking that question on the back end. So I think people focus on new pipeline because they never figured out the problem to begin with.
Interesting. What do you think?
I think you guys said it all. I think I don't think there's enough process around upselling or whatever you want to call it, selling to existing customers. So you brought up the point, well, that's a company of 6, right? And they bought you stuff and there's nothing else to sell them, right? Or there's just, the company's too small or whatever reason there isn't anything there. When's the last time you heard anybody ever use a word or phrase or something that is the same as an ICP for an existing customer? We don't, but you should have one, right? I mean, you should be able to look at all your existing customers and quickly be able to parse out, okay, we only have additional wallet share of X, and then you'll know if it's worth it. I think in many cases, they're not selling to existing customers because by default, that actual wallet share, that X isn't worth the effort. So they look at all their customers, they get 500 customers, right? Nope. We know what it should look like. They should have additional divisions. They should have unused licenses. We should have products they haven't used yet. There should be some assessment, right? And from those 100, you realize 20 could potentially be it. Of those 20, you probably have 15. And they're like, okay, yeah, we should do this. So if you have customer service reps, that should be their job. But outside of that, it's not the amount of effort to get that size of business. So generally speaking, I think it's should have more emphasis around enterprise when you sell into enterprise. But that's a long answer to a short question. Yes, I don't think we put enough process around it.
Okay, so it would be maybe like a process. Okay, Larry, do you want to add something about
No, I would agree. I mean, in terms of having a set process and identifying where those opportunities might lie, I believe it comes down to the relationship. I believe it comes down to the questions that you ask and the understanding that you have of your clients, their current situation, what problem they were trying to solve originally. Are you able to solve that? What's on the horizon? It's really that knowing. I think Keenan says it better than anyone I know. It's understanding the world that your clients and your prospects that they live in. It's stepping into their shoes. And you gave me a masterclass last Sunday and Monday in New York, digging through how well do I understand my clients and my prospects. There's a lot of room for improvement.
A lot of room.
And you've got me thinking about me, myself, as well as those that I work with to help them better understand to up-level. The opportunity is there, but you got to step in and actually seize that opportunity.
I think there's a lot of heartache for people, and I go through this in the course, and I'm like, okay, to even have a ticket to play, I need you to answer me 4 questions. What problem were they trying to solve originally? Have they solved it? And to what degree? Were there any issues? And how egregious were the issues? And were they solved? Because you'll see a whole bunch of stats punted out from Zendesk, and they basically say that after one bad experience, 82% of buyers are willing to not only churn from you, but go to your competitor off of one bad experience. They also ran some stats that if the issue is solved,
they stick with you longer. I was waiting for that piece to come out.
They not only will
Most
stick with
relationships
you
are better
longer,
after the problem,
but they are willing to, 90% said they'd be willing to stay, and they would be willing to give a customer case study. So you're actually statistically better off messing up if you resolve it. So I'm like, the opportunity is there, and I talk to a lot of companies and I'm like, look, I know you have bugs. We all have bugs. And that introduces a unique opportunity
That's why
of
I keep
like,
my hair short.
who are you going to be like in that moment? Like, are you going to take on that full frontal like accountability and say like, hey, I want to make this relationship better? Because it's like all the time companies will ask me, they're like, well, what's the playbook? What's the playbook? I'm like, here's the thing. If you don't make things right, and by right, I mean solve the problem that they were trying to solve, there's no playbook. Like, it's digital. You can't even begin to cross-sell or upsell to someone if you haven't made them happy the first time.
Do the right thing.
So I'm like, you have to go back in. And so I think it gives people heartburn from an emotional perspective to say like, oh, this is embarrassing to me. It exposes a weakness of ours. But I'm like, but if you do it right, even though it does take an emotional blow, I'm like, it actually becomes a strength of like, I'm going to walk into this situation. I'm going to make, those are the fulfilling customers too. Those are the ones that you're like, I'm proud of the results that they saw from me, that they are in a different spot from working with me. Because it's like when they're new pipeline and even when they sign the deal, that's just like I think that you can do this. But like when you're expansion selling well, you know it's because not only did you do it, but you did it well enough to where they want more of the experience. So I'm like, I think because from an emotional view and from to your point of like, no, it's to your point.
Sorry, Larry.
The process of like, you just have to be, it's a process driven thing to think of it of like 87% of customers would be willing to make a referral. Let's not even talk about like, that's a part of expansion selling too, but only 7% of reps will ask for them. And I don't think it's because they don't see the value. I think it's because they didn't do well by them by selling to begin with. So it's like the world is theirs, but to your point, it's going to take process and to a degree, like dying to self. Like, okay, I got to walk in here and I got to admit that I did something, messed up or embarrassing that I don't even know what they were trying to solve. I'm going to be quiet now. I'm pumped.
So
Sorry.
I've got a question, like additional question, because what Keenan mentioned earlier was essentially like you're going to have like the account executive closing a deal.
Yeah.
And then potentially it's going to be the role of customer success to upsell.
Yeah.
Or inside sales.
Yeah.
So essentially another person. However, as Larry mentioned, it's the account executive who's going to build the relationship. So as an account executive, once you have really like understood the problem of your prospects, you actually care because you want to help them solve that problem. Right. And that's why your solution or service is there for. So my question is, do you feel the fact that we're transitioning from someone who actually care until the closing up to another person from the team who actually don't know that person, never had a meeting with them, etc., etc., would that person care as much as the initial account executive? And do you feel like it could be part of the problem? That it's actually two different teams. One is supposed to do the closing, one is supposed to do the upsell.
You're shaking your head. Or you're just like...
No.
Yeah.
My pause is that I'm processing what Guy said and how I want to say this because I actually like Guy a lot. So, but he said something that is very prominent with salespeople. And that is we have a tendency to look at the sale through our eyes in making the sale. When I look at an upsell, particularly if you have a customer success person, is they are 10,000 times better prepared to sell additional things because they're in there, if they're doing it right, they're in there paying attention. So not just in the execution or delivery or implementation of what they bought, but I mean, I'm trying to come up with something off the top of my head, but the metaphor I might use is if the therapist actually got to go home after doing and got to sit in the house, right? So the therapist sells their couple relationship thing one-on-one, right? And then they get to go home, and I mean, they go home with the family, they sit there and they're quietly in the back watching and everything. And after a week, they're like, look, you're doing well on the coupling thing, but I'm noticing some things with the children. I'm noticing you're struggling, that your oldest daughter is doing these things. I know it's frustrating you. I heard you say this. I think one of the reasons your daughter is rebelling is this. I've watched. I have something that addresses that. Would you be open to talking about that? That is the best and easiest fucking sale on the planet if you get your goddamn eyes open, but they don't have their eyes open. So they don't, you know how easy it is to come in and say, I saw this, I read this, I witnessed this, I heard you guys say, and because of that, I remember this happened. You're just stating back the absolute current state of what you witnessed with your own two eyes, and so all you gotta do is say, I think this is something we can help you with. They don't even have to open their mouth like, yeah, you got a good point. So back to my stupid example, oh my God, we'd love to have you come and help us with our daughter. The point is, we're not doing that. We're thinking about who's talking to who, we're not paying attention.
There's a, and this was a risk. It was my first gig as a consultant. I talked to this company. They're at 2.5 million. They need to get to 5 million by the end of the year. And they're like, how do we do it with this pre-existing amount of reps? They're like, we're gonna go new pipeline. They had hired me on as a consultant. This is my first gig. So I'm like, okay, I gotta do really well here. And I'm like, who are your customers? You know, and they're like Google, Facebook, Salesforce. I'm like, oh, these are mega brands. And I'm like, how happy on a scale of 1 to 10 would you say that your customers are with your service? And they're like, well, you know, like, and I ask them a number of different questions. What are the NPS scores? And they're like raving reviews. And I'm like, okay, I need you to trust me. To get you to 5 million, I don't think it's possible with new pipeline. But I need you to trust me. I think you should expansion sell and you should go deeper in these accounts, because they had like 10 bells of the ball. I'm like, this was a roll of the dice, because this is my first client. I'm like, meaning as a consultant, I would have, I think, believed that I could do it, or not believed that based on this client. So they said, okay, we'll trust you. We're going to go expansion selling. So their goal was 5 million. And I was like, I think best case scenario, they would land at 4. They get to 5 million by April of that year with not hiring any additional headcount. So the CEO is like, screw her, let's hike it up to 7.5. And I'm like, 7.5. And I'm like, so let's go deeper again, roll out a plan for them. And they land at 8.1 for the year, calling off all marketing and all new pipeline. Because I'm like, you have these accounts, and if you're making them as happy as you tell me, I think the keys to the kingdom are there if you're doing that. And to your point, like, AEs wouldn't, you know, be allowed to anymore sell the deals that, like, you know, sell the deals on false premises, or not know why the deals are closing, because they got to inherit the relationship. Like, I'm going to treat that bed much differently if I know that I'm, like, this is my bed versus, you know, it's a hotel bed, for instance. So I think that the kingdom, like, it is there. It's just, do we have the temerity to focus on it? Do we have the temerity to chase it and, like, dream how big that world could be? Great. Let's go expansion sell. So this was Green Room Candor, episode Cat Sunk.
Cat ou cinq.
I think it's cat.
That's not a very good word.
Episode. So Green Room Candor, episode Cat. And this was expansion selling, how to do it, expansion selling.